titled On Power, titled Bridging the Power Deficit in Northern Nigeria, Scalable Investments in Decentralization System and Grid Resilience Strategies for Northern Energy Security. The moderator for this panel is Mr. Abubakar Umar. Please put your hands together for Abubakar Umar as he comes to take his seat as the moderator for the power panel. Thank you. You're welcome. And the panelists are the following: Ahmad Rufai Zakari, OON, Investor Representative, Future Energies Africa, and MD Kano Electric. Please put your hands together for him. He spoke to us much earlier. The second panelist is Professor Babakalli Alkali from Glasgow, Caledonian University, United Kingdom. Please put your hands together for Professor Alkali as he comes. The third panelist is Abdul Oladapo, Managing Partner, Murty International. Please put your hands together for Abdul Oladapo. The next panelist is Rahila Thomas. Rahila Thomas is Country Director, Energy Market and Rates Consultants Limited. Please put your hands together for her. It's not loud enough. She's a lady. Give her that rousing. Thank you. Yes. And the last but not the least of the panelists is Engineer Yusuf Usman Yahaya, former MD, Kaduna Electric. Please put your hands together for him. Before I introduce the moderator for the power sector panel, because I will do his introduction and then he will introduce the panelists himself, or he will allow the panelists to introduce themselves. I am directed to warmly request you to please come forward, move forward. Those of you who are at the back, there are enough seats here so that we can populate these very, very first seats. Please come over to the front. Those of you at the back there, you can at least come to the green chairs, and that way, thank you so much. Thank you. Like I said, our moderator for the power sector panel is Abubakar Umar. He's a senior consultant with PricewaterhouseCoopers Nigeria and a chartered accountant, ACA, with first-class degree in accounting. He specializes in the power and broader energy sectors, bringing a unique mix of financial expertise, regulatory insight, and transaction advisory experience. At PricewaterhouseCoopers, Abubakar advises public and private sector clients on projects relating to financial transformation, asset valuation, policy implementation, and transaction advisory support. He has played an active role in driving the implementation of the Electricity Act 2023, particularly at the subnational levels, supporting market transition, regulatory structuring, and financial readiness. Prior to consulting, Abubakar led the financial reporting unit at Yola Electricity Distribution Company, where he spearheaded IFRS compliance post-privatization, handled market reconciliations, and advanced revenue assurance and regulatory reporting to the NERC. His expertise covers due diligence, energy metering economics, project management, and financial modeling, with a proven ability to translate complex financial and regulatory issues into actionable strategies. Recognized for his analytical depth and collaborative style, Abubakar Umar is a rising voice in Nigeria's energy finance space, passionate about sector reforms, utility performance, and financial sustainability of the power industry. Please put your hands together for Abubakar Umar, senior consultant with PricewaterhouseCoopers, Nigeria. And with your permission, I now hand over to you, Abubakar Omar. You will introduce the panelists, or you allow them to do the introductions themselves. Thank you. Please put your hands together for them again. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Good afternoon all. It's my singular privilege to be the moderator of this afternoon panel session, session panel 1. With me, I have esteemed team of industry leaders, power sector experts here. And it's my privilege to also go through their profile, one after the other, starting with the person on my immediate left-hand side. The person on my immediate left-hand side, his name is Ahmad Rufai Zakari, who is an electrical engineer by training and also economics academician by background. He attended the State University of New York at Buffalo. He was also the special advisor to former late President Muhammadu Buhari on power and infrastructure 2019 to 2023. Prior to his current role as a public servant, Ahmad spent his career as General Electric, a company in the United States. Mr. Ahmad spent 15 years working across vast conglomerate of GE Electric, working on executing projects in 20 countries. Ahmad is also an alumnus of General Electric Corporate Audit and Staff. He's also a winner of General Electric Chairman Cycle Award for outstanding performance in the company. Mr. Ahmad has a distinction of being the only African to attain the position of executive director in the GE company at the age of just 28 years, only after 6 years being with the company. Ahmad also has the distinction of being the youngest cabinet in the former administration of President Muhammadu Buhari. Ahmad was also the secretary of the highest policy decision-making group in the country, where he is the secretary of the Presidential Power Sector Coordinating Working Group, chaired by the Vice President with membership from Kaduna State Government, Ministry of Power, Ministry of Finance, and CBN. Under Ahmad, as the special Office of the Special Advisor to the President on Infrastructure, he become a hub for deal structuring and investment. With no specific capital project, the office oversaw, participated, and coordinated multiple critical transactions in electricity transmission, distribution, and on and off grid renewables. Ahmad was also a critical participant in the National Council on Privatization, the NDPAC board, and the National Economic Council. Ahmad has been a pivotal member that has structured and revived Kano Electricity Distribution Company, and he's also serving as an advisor to Future Energies Africa, the investor group that bought the Disco from receivership in 2024. Ahmad is from Giwa local government under Kazaure in Jigawa State. He holds a traditional title of Santuraki of Kazaure and the Prince of the Royal Family of Kazaure by lineage. Ahmad is married with children and enjoys reading, horse riding, and is an admirer and collector of local African arts and craft. Please, round of applause for our presenter. The second person I want to go through briefly his profile is Professor Babakalli Alkali, who has delivered the earlier first presentation here. Professor Alkali is an academician and industry leader from the Glasgow Caledonian University in the UK. He is a professor of mechanical energy and reliability. Over the past 2 decades, Professor Alkali has spearheaded a major research project exceeding $10 million, partnering with global industry. Professor Alkali has published over 95 peer-reviewed articles in leading international journals and conferences. He has successfully supervised 14 PhD students to completion and continues to mentor new researchers, while also serving as examiner for more than 20 PhD candidates across different institutions. His academic credentials include PhD in Operation Research and Applied Mathematics Statistics and an MSc Applied Statistics from Salford University, Greater Manchester in the UK, alongside his BSc in Statistics from University of Maiduguri in Nigeria. Professor Alkali is a fellow of the Operational Research Society, Royal Statistical Society, the Institute of Mathematics and its Application, and the Higher Education Academy. Currently, he is the head of Mechanical Engineering Department and Professor of Maintenance and Reliability Engineering, School of Computing Engineering and Built Environment, Glasgow, Caledonian University. He also served as a director of M&Z Upgrade Limited UK, where he delivered bespoke consultancy service and CPD courses of large-scale companies. Please round of applause for our Prof. The next person on the list is Abdul Oladapo. Abdul is an infrastructure investment, finance, and PPP transaction personnel with over 20 years industry experience in Africa, Asia, and UK. He's the managing partner of Murty International, an infrastructure investment and delivery advisory with experience in PPP, infrastructure investment, climate finance, project management, delivering projects across Africa. His experience in managing and leading investment and transaction teams right from development stage through to fundraising, procurement, and subsequent financial close. Abdul also leads the infrastructure finance team at the UK-Nigeria Infrastructure Advisory Facility, advising senior government decision makers and providing technical assistance to federal and subnational MDS in screening, developing, and financing climate-smart infrastructure development opportunities across various sectors. Please round of applause for Abdul. The next person on the list, which is the only lady, is Rahila Thomas. Rahila has over 20 years experience, 20 years of combined public and private sector experience in the power sector. She has extensive knowledge of all aspects of the Nigerian electricity supply industry, from generation, transmission, and distribution, with respect to how the industry has evolved in structure, management, operations, and performance. She is the Country Director of Energy Market and Rates Consultant Limited, EMRC, in Nigeria, leading and managing an interdisciplinary and dynamic team of consultants and associates that provide transaction advisory, industry-wide power market analysis, financial and techno-economic due diligence, tariff design, policy, and regulatory support. Please round of applause for Rahila Thomas. The last person on the list is Engineer Usman Yahaya. Engineer Usman Yahaya is a registered engineer, is a management consultant, is a business executive, and is a power sector expert with over 17 years of diverse advisory and industry experience. Engineer Usman held senior leadership positions in roles in various companies, ranging from country manager for GE Water and Process Technologies within the GE Power Market, managing director of EN Consulting and Project Limited. He also pioneered the development of 350 megawatts of greenfield renewable project in northern Nigeria. He is a senior expert consultant with the USAID, United States Agency for International Development, of the Nigerian Power Sector Program, where he served as the senior advisor to the managing director, Rural Electrification Agency. He later became the director and chief executive officer of Kaduna Electricity Distribution Company, steering one of the northern discos through a challenging market landscape. Engineer Yahaya's academic foundation is on petroleum and gas engineering, complemented by an MBA from Edinburgh Business School, UK, and is currently pursuing a doctorate degree in energy economics and management. He's a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Power Engineers in Nigeria. He's a member of Corporate Governance Society of Nigeria and also a life member of the Institute of Directors. He currently serves as the Managing Director of Future Energies Africa, the co-investors at Kano Electricity Distribution Company, where he continues to drive reforms, investments, and innovations aimed at strengthening Nigerian electricity power market. Please round of applause for Engineer Yusuf. You will agree with me that we have sufficient and relevant industry expert on this panel, and I'm sure that the discussion we are going to have is going to be a enlightening one. The moderator have given me time of less than 50 minutes, and I believe the panel will be able to deliver very well the point that we need to make on this. As I said earlier, this panel is going to converse on a discussion regarding the northern Nigerian electricity challenges, the solutions that we ought to maintain, and what is the way forward. So let me start with my senior colleague on the left-hand side, Engineer Ahmad Zakari. I think the earlier question I will ask Mr. Ahmad is about energy deficit in Nigeria. Last year, the total energy that is generated in the country and consumed is around 29,000 gigawatts. Out of that, the north as a whole, that's the total 19 states in the northern part of the country, consume only 34% of that. Inside that 34%, Abuja electricity is consuming almost 50% of that. So the question is that how can the north improve its energy capacity? And what source of generations, what's the source of generation sources, solar, hydro, should realistically fill this gap in the next 10 years? That's by 2035.
So thank you very much. It's a very good question, and I think it's a question that has numbers. So it gives a good context of what we want to discuss. I think the problem is both on demand and supply. So I think the metrics you reeled out say that only 34% of the energy in Nigeria, which is a low number to start with, is going to the north. And half of that is going to Abuja, meaning that all of the other states are only consuming half of 34%, essentially 17%. Why I say a bit of it is a demand and a supply problem. On the demand side, we have struggled to transition a lot of our industries from being purely agricultural markets to being agro-industrial markets. So essentially, if somebody is producing hibiscus, he's selling it to the Wano market, they're packaging it, and then they're selling it offshore to be processed. Cashews, same problem. So we have the demand problem in that we need to ensure that more processing, more industrial processing is done in country, particularly in state in northern Nigeria. That will start to help us figure out the demand problem. But that demand problem also cannot be facilitated without appropriate supply. So one of the problems we've had perennially that has killed many of our industries is this issue of lack of power supply and lack of affordable power supply, because some of our industries, even though they could consume grid power, are going fully off-grid. The Lee Group, for instance, in Kano's network is 40 megawatts, and that 40 megawatts is completely off-grid today. We're currently in negotiations with them to bring them back onto the grid, but they decided to take themselves off the grid because of lack of reliability and other things. But they are suffering high cost of electricity, which is impacting their profit margins. So the problem cannot be handled only by supplying electricity, but it also cannot be handled by only the demand side, because somebody wants to set up a factory in Kaduna or in Kano or in Sokoto, and the first thing they're thinking about is, I don't have any stable electricity. So some of the work that electricity distribution companies, as well as the state governments, as well as the federal government need to do is to ensure that we are creating safe areas where industry can get supply. As I mentioned earlier, just in the first half of this year, Kano Electricity Distribution Company is actually pushing an extra, has grown industrial supply by 40%. And we did that because we encouraged industrial players that were off-grid to come back onto the grid, and rather than paying 280 naira per kilowatt hour for a gas solution, you can pay KEDCO 180 naira per kilowatt hour. You make 100 naira surplus on energy savings, and then you can drive. So, but I do believe that we have enough resources, enough ability in terms of solar and wind and hydro, that even if we just buy a little gas or leverage AKK, we can actually be one of the fastest growing markets in electricity in the world. So.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ahmad. I believe I have another follow-up question, but I will come in later. The issue of demand and supply is a very interesting one. But before that, I want to go to Prof. Prof, you have advised a lot of clients across the globe, a lot of them different investment pattern. But the questions I want to talk to you is relating to security and investment. We all know that the North is suffering from, insecurity challenges. So what kind of de-risking model that the government or the private sector need to employ to ensure that, the issue of power supply isn't hindered by the security challenges we are facing in the northern part?
Thank you very much, Chair, for that question. Very good question. In terms of models for security for investors, the best model to use to consider is the PPP, the public-private partnership, or private-public security partnership. So that's one of the best models to try and consider. One of the main reasons for that is that there has to be some sort of sharing of the risks between the government and potential investors so that the asset is not abandoned. So that issue of abandonment of assets, electricity asset, is actually one of the main challenges. So the risk, the de-risking aspect of it is the use of the PPP model. There are different ways in how that can actually be implemented. The first one is more to do with the surveillance, of the whole infrastructure. The surveillance can actually be used by actually looking at the risk, by actually monitoring the system using CCTV cameras, using sensors that can actually be deployed to try and look at the aspect of security. And the second is actually look at the aspect of a risk transfer. So the government cannot just bear the risk of just losing the assets. That risk has to be shared between the government and potential investors. So in that case, the asset cannot be abandoned. Yes. And on the other hand, again, you have the aspect of accountability and affordability. So in terms of taking accountability of the main asset itself, there has to be some sort of regulatory measures that needs to be put in place in terms of the issue if there's any abandonment of the asset. So the PPP model is actually the best model to consider when actually looking at the aspect of energy security.
Yeah, thank you so much, Prof. And that PPP, I believe we have a lot of discussion regarding that also. If time permits, we may return that. Abdul, you have played at the senior role with the UK NIAF, where you advise a lot of clients, I believe. There are a lot of conversation going on around, especially now that we have the Electricity Act going on. So my question here is that if there is one regulatory reform today that you are going to advise or recommend to the northern part of the country to accelerate investment in electricity, what will that possibly be, and how can they, try to achieve that?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. I'll build on what others have said, because you have to look at demand, you have to look at supply, and my other colleague has talked about PPP, but regulatory reform. Can you hear me, please? I know it's a bit noisy. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So one single regulatory reform to be able to address the supply challenges particularly, right? You do need to create an environment where investors are comfortable to invest in power. Right. Based on the Electricity Act 2023, it has created an opportunity for states, right? And I mean, it's important to note that northern states currently are actually behind a lot of the southern states when it comes to creating electricity markets, right? And you do have a significant opportunity. To create market rules that would enable investment to come in, right? And when you're trying to set this up, it's not necessarily about reducing tariffs, right? It's really about creating that environment to having clear rules. When an investor decides, I'm going to, provide power to that would need to get to customers. How will revenue be collected? What are the assurances, right? I mean, I'm not advocating for a mechanism where all you provide is guarantees, where they'll always get their money irrespective of how whether customers take the power or not. But you need to ensure a system is created where the customer, I mean, it actually goes from generation, it gets transmitted, it gets to customers, connections get done. So in creating your state electricity market, your regulator needs to have that capacity to create those rules for the investor to be able to invest in. And in addition to that, I mean, going beyond the supply side, on the demand side as well, yes, I'm pleased to note that all northern states except one have investment promotion agencies, and they all have embedded their PPP framework within their investment promotion agencies, which is crucial. Now, that mechanism there helps create projects which creates economic activity. That economic activity is part of what would drive the demand side, which Ahmad was talking about earlier. Those are the kind of things that would enable you to have investors invest in agro-processing, for example, invest in other economic clusters. But really ensuring you focus on creating credible state electricity markets that would enable both on-grid and off-grid solutions is very important to drive electricity in your areas. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Abdul. Thank you for that. I think I'll go next with Rahila. Rahila, you have been one of the chairman of one of the Northern Discourse. So the North has challenge regarding its network, metering, and so many other things. We have disadvantage on network, particularly when you look at the vast land compared to other part of the country. So what policy update, in your view, do you think will reduce ATC&C and accelerate investment in that?
Thank you for that question. So I know that there's always the temptation to always look at updating energy policies, power policies, laws, but if you look at the provisions of the law and policy today, I think they are sufficient to allow for the distribution companies in the north to access finance that is required to upgrade the network, meter, and improve services. For them to be able to attract investment or financing, I think what needs to happen is for everyone to implement what we have today in the different policies and laws. And what is required is political commitment. You also require regulatory certainty. You require financial viability and operational efficiency. Now, to achieve that, the distribution companies up north need to tackle ATC&C head on. If you look at the Nigerian electricity supply industry today, the aggregate technical and commercial and collection losses are about 39.5%. So let's look at it as 40%. If you go up north, with the 5 discos covering the 19 states, the ATC&C loss is around 55.4%. What that technically means is that for every naira of energy that comes into that region, there's a loss of about 55 kobo or 56 kobo. This definitely is not an attractive situation for financing. So there's a need to tackle that. Of course, this is exacerbated by the fact that up north, the multi-dimensional poverty index is around 80%. 74% in some places over 80%. So that exacerbates the losses factor. I think another culprit will be metering. The metering gap is huge. Collectively, if you put the 5 distribution companies together, they have a total of about 4.7 million customers. Now, 67% of that customer base are not metered. And because they are not metered, it tells that there's issues around estimated billing. And there's a huge distrust of customers where you have utilities because they feel that the estimated billing are over bloated, and it leads to unwillingness to pay and increases revenue loss. And of course, you have we talked earlier about the supply issues because you have the transmission constraints taking power from the south up north is an issue. So if I focus on metering, for example, there are all these government initiatives that distribution companies up north can leverage and use. So for example, we have the presidential metering initiative that raised about 700 billion to close the gap by 7 million meters over 3 years. That is an opportunity that the discos in the north need to take advantage. Also, the regulator has created a meter asset finance fund that provides finance or funds for discos to be able to meter. You have $500 million from the World Bank to also provide metering. So all these are on the table. It just depends on how the discos, use these initiatives in a way that can optimize revenue and reduce losses. As we all know, a fully metered customer base would always guarantee revenues, make it more stable and predictable for financiers and investors to be interested in that place. Lastly, the other thing I would like to touch on is unbundling and creating investable segments. So what do I mean by that? Sometimes problems, when they are big, it looks insurmountable, the network issues. But when such are broken down into smaller, manageable and financeable projects, then it is possible. Because you have investors that are willing to put in 10 billion naira, for example, in a ring-fenced area to address a problem because they can bank on the cash flow based on performance in that network. So I think another way that financing can come into the distribution network to improve the performance is to apply different business models to different customers. So it tells me that data has to drive your strategy. There are some areas where you ring fence and they need their power to be augmented using embedded generation, which has been mentioned earlier. There are some areas that you just have to outsource collection to improve the revenues in that area. And all this is driven by the level of losses. So that's another way of doing that. And I think lastly, I'll look at the fact that it's important for the distribution companies to leverage solar use, solar because it's high potential in the north, and they can do mini grids to address the underserved and unserved areas of the area. So really, you don't need any further adjustments or amendments to policy. What we have works, can work. We just need to implement it. So when you implement it, we see where we need to make changes, then we'll go back and make changes. But right now, you need the political commitment to really just enable the environment to thrive. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Rahila. That's so much of a quiet insight. You have touched on many areas from metering to mini grids and other aspects, which also shows that is the Electricity Act right? You touch on different peculiarities to solving problem. If Kasina needs something, probably Kano need another thing to solve their challenges. I will return to that with another follow-up question, but let me go to Engineer Yusuf. Sir, I think if I may say, you have been the MD of the entire Northwest Disco, having currently been playing a role with Kano and formerly with Kaduna Electricity. Let me make that question to be a bit open. What keeps you awake with respect to electricity in the northern part of the country in relation to generation, transmission, and distribution?
Abdul, very simply, the financial liquidity crisis and market sustainability. And I'll just give 3 data points just so that we can put some things in perspective. When the group of gentlemen and ladies, businesswomen met Mr. President a few weeks ago seeking an intervention from a sector shutdown, they had a bill for 4 trillion at hand seeking payment. 4 trillion. I don't know if you know any other business that's running on the back of a 4 trillion naira debt and counting. A few moments ago, we heard that plus minus discos in northern Nigeria are losing more than 50% of their revenue. Again, I do not know if you know any other business where you take a product to market and you collect less than 50% of what you have taken to market. And the last one is Future Energies Africa, a group of very brave and patriotic investors did something very daring. In 2023, November, they took a very bold step of walking into the fire to buy the core interests in Kano electricity distribution. For the financial year 2023, Kano electricity distribution lost 17 billion. A lot of work has gone in. You're sitting right next to an advisor and a representative of the investors, meaning that, you know, with focus and determination, you have begun to sort of address the challenges, inherent, external, and otherwise, in bringing Kano to really what is possible. But that is one out of many. The challenge then in the sector is such that because you have this liquidity crisis where the generation companies are not able to send that power to discos and collect, they are not making the right investments. But I'm not here to speak for the gencos right here, just yet. Where we are, the segment of the market that we are, is such that we're not collecting. Is it because of the inadequacy of metering? And I should say, Rahila might not like this, but metering doesn't guarantee you revenue. We've seen what customers do with meters. But let's assume for a moment that you meter and that delivers the revenue. We're not seeing the revenue today in Kano. Because we're not seeing the revenue, we do not have the money, the funding, the financial leeway, other than what my investors are putting out steadily on a monthly basis to invest in the disco, to then invest in this utility. Because the requisite investment isn't coming in as quickly as it should, the customers are not happy, including those who think that they have unreasonable bills.
Yeah.
They are not motivated to pay their bills. Never mind those who are stealing energy or those who cannot afford the energy that they consume. And because they do not pay, the market is not receiving this revenue to maintain the turbines, gas or hydro, to pay for gas and everything else that's in between there. This very vicious cycle we saw earlier on in the presentation by the former special advisor to the president, to the extent that if investments doesn't go in, you're not providing the sort of quality that keeps your customers happy. The customers are not happy, the revenue is not coming in, the revenue is not coming in, you restart the cycle all over again.
Vicious cycle.
And from where I sit, this is the problem. But the market is evolving, and we're in that space where, we on the back of the Electricity Act, there's the opportunity now to work with the franchise states. In terms of regulation, in terms of their participation as investors, and we're now seeing what it is that partnerships can deliver between the franchise states and the electricity distribution. But ultimately, I guess sleepless nights, ensuring that we're able to pay the market at the end of every cycle and that we can continue to receive energy and serve our customers while finding the funding to continue to invest and improve the network.
Yeah, thank you so much, Engineer. That was an insightful one. There are so many takeaways. We have gone around the entire problem of the sector. Let me come back close, Mr. Ahmad. I think in your earlier presentation you have touched on a bit of that, but I'm sure if I may repeat the question, might be similar, but somehow you can provide more insight. You know, you have said that the northern part of the country is one of the highest places where there are a lot of underserved or underserved, unserved customers, and this is supported by data from the World Bank also. And then we have a lot of mini grids, different mini grids, more like, bifurcation of the grid into different segments. So the question is that, are we really going to achieve electrification and reliability with those mini grids? What is the position of, expanding different mini grids or ensuring that our grids have work to ensure that we benefit from the economies of scale?
So I think quickly, what we've been advocating for is inward out strategy and an outward in strategy. So what you'll find is if you go to Kano Metropolis or Kaduna Metropolis or Duty, you have a lot of assets to bring power there. The current model or the historical model is to continue to radially expand the grid through grid extension, which is slow and it can be costly. Now the newer model is outward in, go to places without electricity, put a mini grid, and then leave them alone. So what we've been pushing is this interconnected mini grid that bridges the gap. So if you're in peri-urban or rural areas, you look at the options. If it's isolated and far, just do the mini grid for the area alone. If it is connected to the grid, do a mini grid but connect it to the grid. It actually allows you to have a cheap mini grid because there's no battery needed. It connects directly to the grid, serves the community, and can serve the grid. And then for areas that are within the urban landscape, you can expand and continue your grid extension. Now there's the last group which we at Future Energies Africa and Kano Disco are advocating with the states for. It is the group that their consumption is so low that they really don't need to have grid electricity now. The alternative is not to give them any power. So we just started last week a pilot with Kano, Kaduna, and Jigawa. We'd like to roll out thousands of solar home systems that are just individual standalone systems that can go into very rural locations that don't have any access to electricity. So the model we're doing is if you find a Ruga or a Karkara or a Kauye, a small village, we'll take to them, say you have 50 huts there. Yeah. We're saying take a solar home system for every single hut individually, and then they can have supply for fan, at least to charge their phones, and some lights. We're also taking about 2 to 5 solar street lights for each of those communities, and we want a model. So this group, we don't think you should charge them for electricity. We think you should give them electricity for free as part of government's responsibility. So the grade is, we're saying, solar home systems for very poor communities, isolated mini grids for communities that are far from the grid, interconnected mini grids for communities that are close to the grid but get too little power, and then strengthening the grid for urban areas. That's kind of the model that we're working on in Kano. And we're also talking to Jos, Yola, and Kaduna Discos to do best practice exchanges. We have a session we're going to do in the next couple of weeks so we can align on this model and then engage with our state governments on that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Ahmad. That was an insightful point here. Let me move to Prof. Prof, I want to discuss on the issue of tariff. Usually, whenever I'm discussing issue of tariff, industry experts tend to say tariff is more of an art or science. It's an emotional conversation. But the question I want to throw is straightforward. What is the position of electricity affordability, availability, and reliability? They are competing variables whereby investors want high tariff, customers cannot afford or do not want high tariff. So how do we balance this tariff system, especially considering the economic situation of the country?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair, for that question. In my earlier presentation, I actually mentioned the aspect of the 43% of the population don't have access to electricity from the national grid. So when you actually have the aspect of reliability, availability, and affordability, first and foremost, availability is to guarantee access to energy, electricity, for the end consumer. So the reliability aspect, if customers cannot have access to electricity, reliability does not exist.
Yes.
So, and on the other hand, if they have access and you have the aspect of reliability of the electricity in place, in terms of can the customers afford it? I mean, you just mentioned the aspect of free energy to some communities in going forward. So when it comes to tariff, there are different types of tariff options that can actually be put in place. Those tariff options can actually be subsidized because in terms of investors coming in, what will be the return in investment if I invest in, say, mini-grid or other forms of energy? You have to look at that 5, 10, 15 years down the line, how do I recover the money that I've got? So that tariff option is actually really, really important. And again, there could be the aspect of cross subsidies in terms of tariff options to some commercial companies that can actually buy tied and block rates from the energy providers. So that could be an existing tariff options that can actually look at. So there are tied and block rates. A mixture of those ones can actually be provided by the... So those are really, really important aspects that have to do with tariff because investors basically have to look at the aspect of tariff because if we're actually putting money in, what do we get
in return?
The return.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the aspect of reliability, availability in terms of access to energy and affordability, they're actually interrelated. So as I mentioned earlier on, those tariff options is actually looked at carefully in terms of pricing. Say, for example, a household can actually be given 0 to 50 kilowatts at a flat rate for a month.
Yeah, block tariff.
If they might be able to afford it for a certain period of time.
Yeah.
So the price of electricity in terms of, is it 187 naira per kilowatt at the moment? So again, you want to try and look at the situation in the north. Can people afford energy for their daily food consumption?
Yeah.
So that's the question in going forward.
Yeah.
So reliability, availability, and affordability basically are all interrelated.
Yeah.
So if one doesn't exist, so the other one collapses. Entirely.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Prof, for that. Abdul, the next question, I'm going to dive into the Electricity Act. This is what has been trending, and I see a lot of activities, particularly on the UKNIAF. A lot of states are passing their laws. Other states have passed, some states have received transition order. So in your opinion, what is the area that those states supposed to, focus on to ensure that they have improved their electricity?
Okay, there are a number of provisions in the Electricity Act which the states can take advantage of. So for example, it gives them powers to regulate generation and also, regulate distribution. One of the things that would need to happen as a result of them getting a transition order is that the discos will be mandated to create subcos and I think I'll maybe build on what Rahila said earlier. Sometimes when a problem is too big, if you make it smaller, it might be easier to manage. So by having maybe a subco, now we can reflect back on on what has happened in the Nigerian supply industry for many years. States have heavily invested in the distribution assets in the country. I mean, a lot of the wires that has been built and installed, they're owned by states, right? They were put in there by states, but they don't have any ownership in there. In a way, it sort of discourages for the investment sometimes, and in some cases, government wants to invest because they do realize, I mean, for example, you're the governor of your state, right? You don't have the people in your state are not going to Abuja to complain about electricity. They're complaining to you. Yeah. You might just decide, you know what, you sit down with your essays and commissions and you decide to commit a portion of your budget on electricity, and you can continue to invest. But when that is not actually factored into some sort of ownership, it's a challenge. So one of the things that states should do is, for the distribution companies, they should engage with the federal government. They have invested in over time, and the records are there. The investment federal government has made, the investments states have made. Yeah. It is codified. It can be taken in, and some sort of valuation can be made to actually give states some sort of ownership in the disco. And then a state can then decide, are we willing to further invest in distribution, right? Because you do have challenges, particularly in some of the discos, where the liquidity challenges are so difficult, are so serious that they can't invest further, right? I'm not always an advocate of government investment, but for some of the short-term challenges you need to address, that might be a way to consider it. So if you have a mechanism to be able to work out that 40% that is held by federal, which of it, maybe all of it can move to the states, and there will be some sort of arrangement to move government. It might be looking at the assets of the Nigeria Power Holding Company, for example. So I think there are ways that can be managed, and that gives states seats on the table on the distribution assets. Then what they can do in making their state electricity market work is in licensing generation. Yes, there is on-grid. Ahmad has talked about off-grid as well. There's also the opportunity for them to ensure they are able to roll out or create a mechanism that would increase investment in off-grid in their states as well. Yeah. So like really able to ensure, the market works from generation to distribution, and being able to at least ensure they actively support the distribution companies to be able to work a lot more effectively. I would allow industry experts like Rahila and Engineer Yusuf to put in more detail, but I think these are thoughts that would help improve the electricity markets in the States.
Yeah, thank you so much. You touched about equity, which I believe Ahmed also discussed, and shows how they are partnering with Jigawa State with regard to those kind of things. It's an interesting. Rahila, my next question to you is about subsidy. It's more like 2-in-1. Can the sector survive without subsidy? And then, what is the best way to administer subsidy, considering we have a lot of people who cannot afford such?
Very sensitive topic, I would say, considering where we are today in Nigeria. So when you think about the state of the economy, we have inflation down to 20.12%, which is good, that it's dropping, but that has not translated to improved purchasing power for the people. If you look at the fact that I think last week the central bank reduced the MPR to 27%, that tells you that interest rates will drop, but they are still above 30%, and that is quite prohibitive in getting loans for your business. And you also look at the cash reserves ratio, which again was dropped from 50% to 45%. That says that there's enough cash now for the banks to lend to the real sector. all that has effect on the power sector, and it's not surprising. When you talk about subsidies, for instance, I have to use numbers to be able to respond to that. So if you look at the first quarter of 2025, MBET invoiced all the distribution companies about 905 billion naira. Now, 40.8% of that is the obligation of the distribution companies, and the difference, which is 59.2%, is what government is providing in subsidies. And that subsidy, while it's creating lower tariffs for the certain customers, it is targeted at the production, because that goes to the generation companies for the energy they are selling. So looking at that balance, and you say to yourself, how much is being remitted? Today, you have the distribution companies remitting about 96%. So they are paying their share of that invoice. They are paying 96%. I think about 7 discos from the 11 are paying 100% of their obligation. And I'd like to say that Yola and Kano, I think, are one of those northern discos paying 100%. And I think 35% of that subsidy, I think is a good place to clap. Very good place to clap, and well done, Ahmed and the team. So if you look at that number, 35% of that goes to the northern discos of the subsidy. It tells me that the payment risk has moved from the distribution end of the business to the government, because government is not paying. I mean, Yusuf talked earlier about the debts. Yeah. So it tells me that in the state in which the market is today, or the sector, you cannot do without subsidies. It cannot really. It will struggle without subsidies. But more importantly, it will not thrive if you don't have a carefully managed and transitional subsidy regime. I think that is really the key word there. It has to be well managed, it has to be transitional, it has to be targeted, transparent, and also ensure that it is really meeting the purpose for subsidies. Subsidy is not meant to be a permanent crutch. It's meant to be something that you use to take a company or a sector from a survival mode to a sustainable mode. So from where I stand, and the numbers is telling me that subsidy won't go away. If you just think for 1 minute that you took out subsidy completely, it would be a colossal collapse of the financial system in the power sector. So that's not what we want. We want a better structured subsidy regime that allows that transition to a more sustainable. And to your second question, where it sits, the Electricity Act provides for what you call a Power Consumer Assistance Fund. This was also in the former Act, EPSRA, but was never implemented. So I would, advocate for the need for that mechanism to be established, because it pulls away subsidy from within the tariffs. So the way it works is that the Electricity Act says cross-subsidization should go away completely. And the only way for you to do that over time is to quantify it. So if you quantify it, what the Act is saying is that it will be structured as a levy. So there will be a selection of customers who will be paying into that fund for subsidy, and you have eligible customers also paying. NERC is going to determine what the rate of contribution is, and it will be guided by the Ministry of Power as to how it will be disbursed. So for me, I feel that the PCAF, as it's called, should be implemented. And in terms of targeting, you have today the conditional cash transfers happening. It's supposed to target 15 million households. So we can use the national social registers today to determine that, because in the power sector, the total customer base is about 13 million. And those that will be subsidized is a fraction of that. So I see that it is possible to structure a subsidy that would really, be transitional and support the industry to get to a sustainable state. I think that's where, and what I wanted to respond to was Yusuf's point earlier, where he said that metering is not, and I agree with you, metering is not a silver bullet. However, what I did not qualify it with is that it has to be done in parallel with so many other revenue protection measures, and more importantly, also, bringing in automated or advanced metering infrastructure in a way that you can remotely detect tampering and, ensure that revenue is not leaking. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Rahila, for taking that. I understand subsidy is a very sensitive topic, especially now. I'll go forward to Engineer Yusuf, and I think that is a very important question for particularly this forum. Last year, a lot of activities, a lot of incidents happened, particularly affecting only the northern state. If we recall, around April, Jos Gombe line has developed a fault, throwing the entire northeast state, almost 5 or 6 of them, into darkness. I think it's lasting for about 6 weeks. And similar incident also happened around October, whereby the Ugwaj upper line also developed fault. The entire northwest, north central, northeast, and some part of north central also do not have electricity for more than 1 or 2 weeks. It impacted, hospitals, education, even the revenue for the generation companies. So this is like, 1 or 2 single point of failures. What is the leaders, do either individually or collectively as a region to ensure that, a point of failure does not render the entire region in darkness for a prolonged period of time?
I'll give, again, a reference project just so that we can also relate with it. When power went out because the Shiroro-Mando line was compromised, in addition to the backup, it took out Kano electricity distribution operations and other discos, but I'll focus on Kano for a moment, for 12 days. And other discos as well. For 12 days, there was no power. But there's a community in Kano called Gidadubu, where one of the businesses within the FEA group had developed before now a 1 megawatt interconnected mini grid, serving a large population there of customers. They were not affected at all for those 12 days. In fact, some people did not know that that had happened.
Interesting.
And this was instructive in the time since FEA is now being in KEDCO, distributed power. Again, we saw earlier on this morning when we saw the presentation on the outlook for electrifying northern Nigeria 2025 to 2035. We see the infrastructure gap there, generation-wise, transmission-wise. We're at the far end of the grid. There's no generation in the region that we're discussing. You're susceptible to whatever fragilities are happening in the transmission network. And so the lesson, instructively as well, to KEDCO and for us within the FEA group then was to look at distributed energy. And if you want to bring it home more closely, embedded generation. Yeah. And you can go low as well and do the isolated mini-grids and interconnected mini-grids. And so in Kano, what we're doing, it's a template that's replicable, is really that to the extent that you're susceptible to the weaknesses in the grid, you must then bring in some element of generation within your network. You will do this analysis on the basis of a least cost electrification model. Some communities are better served with solar home systems, for example. Some you could extend the grid. Some interconnected mini grid. Others, as FEA is doing, is really that for the first time, we're now leading investment to bring in and start utility scale grid connected gas-fired generation within Kano electricity distribution network. This really will be the way to go. You cannot be, haphazard about it, certainly not. It will not be a knee-jerk reaction, but if you have a network, you have multiple states, you have majority of northern Nigeria out of power for 12 days because the two strings connecting the two ends of that network has gone down, it means then that you need to bring some generation closely, is the first part. The second part is the recognition that our customers are citizens of states. And in that respect, the partnership, the support, and the collaboration with states is critical. And so the engagement, as the FEA group has recently had, with the leadership of some states, the franchise states in KEDCO, is really where are you? Where are you going? What is the outlook? And how can we jointly advance the cost of electrifying our people? Yeah. For the states, is social investments. Yeah. For KEDCO, is social investments, is financial returns, is corporate social responsibility.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Engineer. I believe those are good measures. Before we round up, Ahmed, I want to just hit on one question. We have Electricity Act. Every state is passing their own law. What are your fears, or excitement regarding every state have a regulatory, body, considering you play across different states?
I think it's a fitting question, perhaps, to close the session. The regulation does not bring investment. And I think right now there's two groups of individuals on this, or two groups in this Electricity Act. They're proponents, and there's not opponents, but some that are asking for us to treat with caution. As I showed the group earlier, there's certain cross-subsidy regimes that make sense. Kano, Kaduna, and Jigawa as a cluster, if you take out Kano, Kaduna and Jigawa's electricity becomes unaffordable and potentially inaccessible. You have the same with Kaduna, Kebbi, Sokoto, and Zamfara. If you take out Kaduna, Kebbi, Sokoto, and Zamfara are not real bankable markets. So there was some concern from some of us northern power sector participants when the Electricity Act was passed, because as I stated earlier, there is no power plant greater than 100 megawatts in the northeast or the northwest, and even in the north central we only have Kogi and Niger. So whereas if you go to the southern part of the country, because that's where most of the gas was and the investments were initially, even Bayelsa has more installed capacity than the entire Northeast. Yeah. So our worry is we now had an uneven market and we then said everybody go your way. But one part of the country doesn't have any infrastructure or capability for a market, and the other is fully set up. So we are still pushing and advocating for a fairer electricity market model. We're still working with our states, particularly, like I said, in Kano electricity distribution network. We are pushing for a joint electricity regulatory market between Kano, Kaduna, and Jigawa. We're also advocating that Kaduna, Kebbi, Sokoto, and Zamfara do the same. And if we would have our wish, we would even hope for a northwest regional market and then advocate for a northeast regional market. And then if I have a hydro plant, or Kaduna now has gas plants and AKK coming can come, Kaduna can power the northeast with gas. We can take some hydro from the north central. In the northeast, where we have Datunkowa, we have Kashimbila, and other dams, they can also work, and then we can also see how to give them more. But we should not be advocating for Zamfara or Nasarawa or even Sokoto, small markets to go away, because they actually cannot sustain a tariff in our numbers below 250 to 300 naira per kilowatt hour. And if you have a tariff of 250 to 300 naira per kilowatt hour, that's diesel generation level, and then nobody can provide investment or industrial output there. So we're opposed to this full cannibalization. We are working on it both intellectually and from an investment standpoint, and we pray and hope that with the amendments to the Electricity Act, as well as some states taking more liberty with the room given in the Act, we can come up with some solutions that work for everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Ahmed. That is an interesting discussion and a very, very insightful point. The issue of the Electricity Act is a very sensitive one. Every state is trying to. So because of, in the interest of time, I just want us maybe in 30 seconds to just answer. Let me start from Engineer Yusuf there. I just want the question across board. What is your thought about Ban A perspective?
It's a solution to a problem, and so far mixed reviews, but it is addressing the problem. What was the problem? How do I get the tariff, or how do I get customers to pay what it is reflective of their consumption? As a thoughtful approach to sort of engaging those who can afford it and those who are receiving better quality of service, those who should pay more, given that they receive more, in that proportional, manner.
Yeah.
I think it's a creative solution at a long-running problem, but it's still work in progress.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Rahila?
Well, my view is that when you have uniform tariffs across the country, it tells me that it's inefficient pricing, because it's not really factoring in the actual cost of operation. Because what 209 did, while it is creative, fine, because it's matching the service levels, what is done is just reduce. So government decides that, I need to reduce my government obligation, subsidy obligation.
Yeah.
You take out a portion, 25%, and you just smear it across a particular band that can afford it. So what I would suggest is, of course, a redefining or redesigning of tariffs by the distribution companies in a way that it's much more equitable in a sense, because if I'm in band A, I'm paying 209. If I'm in band B, I pay maybe under 100 naira and I'm getting 16 hours. I'm okay with that, because the marginal increase in the power I get, I can sort that out, or I can do without it even, because it's just so high. So I think that the distribution companies must look at redesigning their tariffs in a way that it can give the right price signals to investors to bring in finance and investment, but also provide, push customers to be more willing to pay, because they feel that the tariffs are much more equitable rather than having this huge disparity between them. So that's, and the last point is that I think it's also important that the states and the distribution companies need to partner to carry out an electricity affordability study. I think it's so important, because for states, they can use that for planning, and it's a strategy document, a tool for a DISCO to understand who can afford what and how you can play around social welfare initiatives and all that. Thank you.
Yeah, electricity affordability is a good initiative, even though some people are mirroring, poverty index, minimum wage, and other metrics to check that. Abdul, in 30 seconds, what's your thought on Bane?
Yeah, thank you. I'll build on what my colleagues have said. Well, so really, looking at affordability is very, very important, because some of the areas we talk about, underserved areas with inadequate, with no access and all of that, when they actually do get power, they typically would pay higher than band A. And that's one reality. When you look at some of the tariffs paid at mini-grid assets in rural communities, they're higher than band A. So it's important to do an affordability study and really be clear about what are people paying for the kind of power they get. And you translate that into it. Government is struggling to pay its obligations. If you keep everybody, if the subsidy continues, 4 trillion will balloon and all. So in as much as Band A seems to be an initial solution. It's really important to ensure the market transitions to market-reflected tariffs. But on the side of that, it's also important for economic activities to be created for people to be able to afford to pay for electricity. Thank you.
Thank you. Prof.
Thank you very much. From my own point of view, because I've not read the Electricity Act 2023 in detail, the aspect that had to do with the banding system, I feel from my experience is a bit marginalizing some aspects of the community or consumers as a whole. The reason why I'm actually saying that, and I totally agree with the panelists that say that the affordability study needs to be conducted, just to ensure that the aspect of electricity can be affordable to everybody. The reason why I'm actually saying that, I've done some study in the UK in terms of looking at the percentage increase for the whole UK in terms of the number of kilowatt that has been paid by individual is the same for everybody, unless if someone has to pay for a green rate, which is actually higher.
Yes.
So that's my take on that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I know maybe 1 or 2% among the audience will say it's a discrimination, or maybe they will accuse of bias. So, Ahmed, I think you can take out the closing on your thought.
I mean, I think, look, diesel is like 320 naira per kilowatt hour. Band A is 209. I think one thing it did, it proved that if you provide power at a rate below diesel, there's a market for it. But I do think we need to redesign the tariffs. It was a good experiment at that time. But to be honest, very few people in Kano's network pay 209. We discount everybody and we keep most residential customers at 80 because it's not a real tariff that we did based on our reality. So I think it was a good experiment. Maybe it's time for us to migrate away from it.
Thank you so much, Ahmed. I believe this is a wonderful discussion. So many takeaways and solutions are provided by industry experts. I think in the interest of time, this has come to the end of our conversation on that. I believe we have learned a lot and understand so much. The conversation continues, and that's the importance of having that summit. I believe when we begin to discuss the problem at a larger scale, we can begin to solve the problem, even not immediately, but gradually. So thank you very much, panelists. Thank you so much.
Please put your hands together once again for the entire panel. It's been a wonderful panel.